44 BC, Rome, the Senate House, torchlight, marble floors, the smell of blood. 23 senators, 23 daggers. One man on his knees. He had conquered Gaul. He had crossed the Rubicon. He had made kings bow before him. He had held the Roman Republic in the palm of his hand. And now, the most powerful man in the world was bleeding out on the floor of the Senate. His last words? No one truly knows. Some say he said nothing. Some say when he saw his closest friend among the assassins, he whispered, "Et tu, Brute? Even you, Brutus?" And then, silence. But here is what his killers didn't understand. They thought killing Caesar would save the Republic. Instead, it destroyed it forever. Because Julius Caesar wasn't just a man, he was an idea. And you cannot stab an idea to death. This is the story of the man who conquered half the known world, who rewrote the rules of power, who was betrayed by his own friends, and still won. This is Julius Caesar. Let's begin.
100 BC, Rome. The Roman Republic was 400 years old, and it was rotting from the inside. On paper, Rome was a democracy. 2 elected consuls, a senate of 300 powerful men, laws, votes, debate. But in reality, Rome was an oligarchy, a playground for the ultra-rich. The same elite families, the optimates, had controlled the Senate for generations. They made the laws, they broke the laws, and the ordinary Roman, the farmer, the soldier, the poor man in the street, had almost no voice. The gap between rich and poor was catastrophic. Wealthy senators owned millions of acres of land, farmed by slaves captured in Rome's endless wars. Meanwhile, Roman soldiers, who had spent 20 years fighting those wars, came home to find their farms gone, sold, seized, taken.
2 reformers, the brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, had tried to fix this. They proposed land reforms, redistribute wealth, give the poor a chance. The Senate had them both murdered. That was Rome in 100 BC, a republic that killed reformers, a democracy that served only the powerful, a city of 1 million people, where most lived in poverty, while a few hundred families controlled everything. And into this world, on the 13th of July, 100 BC, a boy was born. His name, Gaius Julius Caesar. He was born into the gens Julia, an ancient patrician family that claimed descent from the goddess Venus herself. Noble blood, old name, but not particularly wealthy, not particularly powerful. Nobody in Rome that day thought, this child will change everything. They were wrong.
Rome's political world in Caesar's youth was not just corrupt, it was lethal. When Caesar was a teenager, Rome was torn apart by civil war. 2 generals, Marius and Sulla, fought for control of the Republic. Marius, the populist general. Sulla, the darling of the Senate. Sulla won. And then he did something Rome had never seen before. He published prescription lists, lists of enemies to be killed. Hundreds of Romans, senators, knights, ordinary citizens were murdered, their property seized, their families destroyed. Caesar was on Sulla's radar. Why? Because Caesar's uncle was Marius, and Caesar had married the daughter of one of Sulla's enemies. Sulla's men came for him. Caesar, barely 18 years old, fled Rome. He hid. He moved constantly. At one point, Sulla's soldiers nearly caught him. Caesar reportedly bribed his way to freedom. When powerful friends eventually interceded with Sulla on Caesar's behalf, Sulla agreed.
but reportedly said something chilling. In this Caesar, there are many Mariuses.
Even then, even as a teenager on the run, something about Caesar made powerful men nervous. Caesar left Rome. He went east to the province of Asia to serve, to learn, to survive. And it was in the east that the first legend of Caesar was born. The pirates of the Aegean. Caesar was sailing when his ship was captured by pirates. They demanded a ransom, 20 talents of silver. Caesar, as a prisoner, laughed. He told them they were undervaluing him. He would pay 50 talents. The pirates thought this was flattering. Caesar thought it was promising, because he fully intended to come back and crucify every single one of them. While his associates gathered the ransom, Caesar lived among the pirates for 38 days. He wrote poetry and read it to them. When they didn't applaud enthusiastically enough, he called them illiterate barbarians to their faces. He told them, repeatedly, that once he was free, he would hunt them down and kill them. The pirates laughed. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. The moment the ransom was paid and Caesar was free, he raised a small fleet, found the pirates at anchor, captured them all, and crucified them, exactly as he had promised. He was 25 years old. This was the pattern of Julius Caesar for the rest of his life. He said what he would do, and then he did it.
Caesar returned to Rome after Sulla's death, and he understood something that most Roman politicians did not. In Rome, everything was politics. The law courts, the military, the priesthood, the games, the funerals. Every public act was a performance, and the audience was the Roman people. Caesar became the greatest performer Rome had ever seen. He started as a lawyer. He was brilliant in court, sharp, witty, devastating in cross-examination. He prosecuted corrupt Roman governors with such skill that all of Rome took notice. He got himself elected as a military tribune, then as a quaestor, a financial official. He served in Spain. He observed, he learned. But Caesar was always spending more than he had. He borrowed enormous sums from Rome's richest man, Marcus Licinius Crassus. He spent money on public games, giving Rome's citizens free entertainment on a scale they had never seen. He spent money on public buildings, on bribes, on alliances. Every denarius was an investment in his political future.
In 63 BC, Caesar ran for the position of Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of Rome, the most prestigious religious office in the Republic. Candidates for this position were normally elderly, distinguished senators with lifetimes of service. Caesar was 37 years old and deeply in debt. He won anyway, because he had spent his borrowed money on buying votes and on building genuine loyalty among Rome's common people, who loved him. That morning, before the vote, Caesar reportedly told his mother, "Today you will see your son either as Pontifex Maximus or as an exile." He won. And then, in 60 BC, Caesar made his most important political move yet. He formed an alliance with the two most powerful men in Rome, Pompey, Rome's greatest general, the man who had conquered the East, defeated pirates, and brought untold wealth back to Rome. Popular, powerful, but politically clumsy.
Crassus, Rome's richest man, fabulously wealthy, politically shrewd, but lacking military glory. And Caesar, politically brilliant, popular with the people, but lacking military experience and deeply in debt. Together, they could control Rome. This alliance, history would call the First Triumvirate. 3 men, 1 city, and between them, more power than the Senate had ever seen. Caesar used this alliance to get himself elected as consul in 59 BC, Rome's highest elected office. And from the consulship, he secured something he had been maneuvering toward for years: command of the armies in Gaul. The real game was about to begin.
58 BC, northern Italy, the edge of the Roman world. Caesar arrived in Gaul with 4 legions, roughly 20,000 men. Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, Switzerland, and parts of Germany, was a vast territory of Celtic tribes, fierce warriors, proud people, independent. Rome controlled the southern strip, Provincia, modern Provence. But the rest of Gaul, Gallia Comata, long-haired Gaul, was free. Caesar intended to change that. His official justification was protection. A tribe called the Helvetii were migrating through Roman territory. Caesar stopped them, defeated them, sent them back. Then he kept going. What followed over the next 8 years was one of the most extraordinary military campaigns in human history. Year 1, Ariovistus and the Germans. A Germanic warlord named Ariovistus had crossed the Rhine and was dominating Gallic tribes. Caesar marched against him. His soldiers were terrified. Germanic warriors had a fearsome reputation. Some of Caesar's own officers refused to march. Caesar's response was contemptuous. He told his officers that if no one else would march, he would march alone, with only the 10th Legion, which he trusted. But the shame worked. They all marched. They defeated Ariovistus decisively. Year 2, the Belgae.
The tribes of modern Belgium, the Belgae, were considered the fiercest warriors in all of Gaul. Caesar crushed them in a series of brutal engagements, nearly losing one battle when his army was caught off guard, but personally rallying his troops, grabbing a shield, pushing to the front line, fighting alongside his soldiers. His men worshipped him for this. Caesar always fought where his men could see him. Year 4, Britain. Caesar did something no Roman commander had ever done. He crossed the English Channel, twice. He invaded Britain, modern England. He didn't fully conquer it, but he planted the Roman flag on British soil, extracted tribute from British tribes, and sent back dispatches to Rome that made him the most talked about man in the Republic. Rome went mad with excitement. The Senate declared 20 days of public thanksgiving, unprecedented. Year 6, the Naval War. The Veneti tribe of coastal Gaul had a powerful fleet. Caesar had no navy. He built one from scratch in weeks and destroyed the Veneti fleet in a brilliant engagement where Roman soldiers used long hooks to tear down Gallic sails before boarding and overwhelming the crews. Caesar innovated constantly. Whatever the problem, he found a solution.
Year 7, Vercingetorix and the Great Revolt. This was nearly the end of everything. In 52 BC, the Gallic tribes did something they had never done before. They united, under a single leader, a young Arverni chieftain named Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix was brilliant. He understood that he could not defeat Roman legions in open battle. So he adopted a scorched earth strategy, burning Gallic towns before Caesar could use them for supplies, hitting Roman supply lines, wearing Caesar down. It almost worked. Caesar's army was stretched, hungry, exhausted. Vercingetorix gathered an army of over 80,000 warriors. The decisive confrontation came at Alesia, a hilltop fortress where Vercingetorix retreated with 80,000 men. Caesar did something audacious. He surrounded Alesia with a ring of fortifications, 18 kilometers of walls, towers, and ditches, to starve Vercingetorix out. Then a Gallic relief army arrived, 250,000 warriors, surrounding Caesar's army from the outside. Caesar was now trapped between two armies, 80,000 inside, 250,000 outside. His own force, roughly 50,000. So he built another ring of fortifications, facing outward, to hold off the relief army while maintaining the siege inside. For weeks, Caesar's legions fought on two fronts simultaneously. The relief army attacked from outside. Vercingetorix attacked from inside.
Caesar raced his forces from crisis to crisis along his fortifications. At the critical moment, Caesar himself led a cavalry charge that broke the relief army's final assault. Vercingetorix surrendered. He rode out of Alesia alone, laid his weapons at Caesar's feet. Gaul was conquered. The cost was catastrophic. Ancient sources claim that over the 8 years of the Gallic Wars, 1 million Gauls were killed, another million enslaved. Entire tribes were destroyed. Caesar wrote about all of this in his own dispatches, Commentari de Bello Gallico, with clinical, almost cold precision.
He described mass killings the way a farmer might describe a harvest. His enemies in Rome called him a war criminal. His soldiers called him a god. And Caesar returned to Rome, not as a servant of the Republic, but as its master.
49 BC,
Northern Italy, the banks of the Rubicon River. The Rubicon was a small river, unremarkable, easy to cross. But it was the law of Rome that no general could bring his army across the Rubicon into Italy proper. To do so was treason. It was the law that kept Rome safe from its own military, the guarantee that generals served the Republic, not themselves. Caesar stood on the northern bank. Back in Rome, the Senate, terrified of Caesar's power and popularity, had ordered him to disband his army and return as a private citizen. His enemies, led by Pompey, who had switched sides, were waiting to prosecute him, to destroy him, possibly to kill him. Caesar's allies sent frantic messages from Rome. Negotiations had failed. There was no deal to be had. Caesar faced a choice: obey and be destroyed, or cross and make war on Rome itself. Ancient historians say Caesar hesitated at the river for a long time, weighing everything: the Republic, the law, his own life. And then he spoke words that have echoed through history. The die is cast. He crossed the Rubicon. His legions, loyal to him above all else, followed without hesitation. What happened next shocked Rome. Caesar's army moved south with terrifying speed. Town after town surrendered without a fight, many genuinely welcoming him. Pompey, caught off guard by Caesar's speed, fled Rome, then fled Italy entirely to Greece to rebuild his forces. Caesar entered Rome without bloodshed. In weeks, he had achieved what armies had failed to do in centuries. But the war was far from over.
Pompey was not finished. He had fled to Greece with much of the Senate. He was assembling a massive army. He had the support of Rome's eastern provinces, enormous wealth and manpower. He had the support of most of the Roman aristocracy. And in North Africa, another army. In Spain, yet another. Caesar had Italy and his veterans. Spain first. Caesar's strategic instinct was flawless. He didn't chase Pompey east immediately. He first neutralized Pompey's armies in Spain in a brilliant campaign of maneuver that forced his enemies to surrender with almost no major battle. He famously said he was going to fight an army without a general before facing a general without an army. Greece, Pharsalus. Caesar crossed to Greece with an undersized force. He was outnumbered, his supply lines were poor. Pompey had the advantage and, under pressure from impatient senators, chose to force a decisive battle. At Pharsalus, 48 BC, the two greatest Roman armies in history faced each other. Pompey had nearly twice Caesar's numbers. His cavalry was vastly superior. Caesar anticipated Pompey's cavalry charge, the planned knockout blow. He hid a reserve infantry force behind his right flank. When Pompey's cavalry attacked, the reserve emerged, not throwing javelins as cavalry expected, but thrusting upward at the faces of Pompey's horsemen. Pompey's cavalry broke, fled. Caesar's veterans rolled up Pompey's exposed flank. The battle was over in hours. Pompey fled the field.
Caesar reportedly walked through the carnage afterward and wept at Romans killing Romans. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge with the young pharaoh Ptolemy the 13th. It was a fatal mistake. Ptolemy, calculating that Caesar's favor was more valuable than Pompey's friendship, had Pompey assassinated as he stepped ashore. When Caesar arrived in Egypt and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he turned away and wept. Pompey had been his enemy, but he had also been his son-in-law, once his friend.
Egypt and Cleopatra. Caesar arrived in Egypt in the middle of a civil war between Ptolemy XIII and his sister, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was 21, intelligent, politically brilliant, multilingual. She spoke 9 languages, reportedly the first of the Ptolemaic dynasty to actually learn Egyptian. She needed Caesar's support to regain her throne. According to the most famous version, she had herself smuggled to Caesar, rolled inside a carpet. She was unrolled before him. Caesar was 52. Whatever passed between them that night, Caesar chose Cleopatra. He fought and won the Alexandrian War, restored Cleopatra to power, and stayed in Egypt for months, long enough for Cleopatra to become pregnant with his son, Caesarion. Then, more enemies called him back to war. The Eastern Campaign. Veni, Vidi, Vici. In Asia Minor, modern Turkey, a king named Pharnaces had taken advantage of the Roman civil war to seize territory. Caesar marched against him.
The battle was so swift, so decisive, that Caesar sent Rome the most famous military dispatch in history. Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. 5 days, 1 battle, done. Africa and Spain. Pompey's supporters had regrouped in North Africa. Caesar defeated them at the Battle of Thapsus, 46 BC. Then, in what seemed like the final act, Pompey's sons raised yet another army in Spain. Caesar marched across the entire length of the Mediterranean world again and destroyed this final army at the Battle of Munda in 45 BC. He was the last man standing. The Roman Civil War was over. Julius Caesar had won. He was 54 years old, absolute master of the Roman world.
Caesar returned to Rome as its undisputed ruler. The Senate, what remained of it, granted him the title Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator in perpetuity, Dictator Forever. In Rome, a dictator was a legitimate emergency office held for 6 months during crises. Dictator Forever was something new, something that had no precedent, something that sounded to Roman aristocratic ears exactly like a king. And Romans had expelled their last king 460 years earlier. They had a near-religious hatred of monarchy. Caesar seemed either not to understand this or not to care. What Caesar did with power was remarkable. He reformed the Roman calendar. The old Roman calendar had drifted so badly that the official date and the actual astronomical date were months apart. Caesar, working with the Egyptian astronomer Sisigines, introduced the Julian calendar, 365 days with a leap year every 4 years. With minor modifications, this is the calendar the entire world still uses today.
He passed laws limiting the concentration of wealth. He settled tens of thousands of Roman veterans on land, in new colonies across the empire. He extended Roman citizenship to people in the provinces. He launched massive public works programs. He reformed the courts. He reduced debt burdens on the poor. He even regulated the traffic in Rome, banning wheeled vehicles from the city center during daylight hours because congestion had become unmanageable. By almost any measure, Caesar's reforms were good for ordinary Romans, the poor, the veterans, the provinces. But Caesar's manner of governing was deeply troubling to the Senate. He didn't consult, he decided. He didn't debate, he decreed. He stuffed the Senate with his own men, expanding it from 600 to 900 senators, filling it with Gauls and provincials and his own supporters. He sat to receive foreign ambassadors, which was normal, but he sat when the entire Senate came to present him honors, which was not. He failed to rise. Whether this was deliberate arrogance or a medical episode, ancient sources debate. The insult to the Senate was felt deeply.
And then came the crown. At the festival of Lupercalia, February 44 BC, Caesar's colleague Mark Antony offered him a royal diadem, a crown. 3 times. 3 times Caesar refused it, pushed it away. The crowd cheered each refusal, but the performance felt staged, calculated, as if Caesar was testing the water, seeing how Rome would react to a king, while maintaining deniability. The Senate's old guard, the Optimates, who had always resented Caesar, had seen enough. A conspiracy formed. At its center, 2 men. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a brilliant, bitter general who deeply resented Caesar's dominance, the ideological engine of the conspiracy. Marcus Junius Brutus, Caesar's closest friend. A man Caesar trusted absolutely. A man Caesar had spared after Pharsalus. Brutus had fought on Pompey's side and forgiven. A man Caesar reportedly loved like a son. There were eventually 23 senators in the conspiracy. They called themselves liberatores, liberators. They chose a date, the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BC. The day Caesar was scheduled to appear in the Senate before departing Rome to lead a major campaign east.
The night before the Ides of March, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, had nightmares. She dreamed of blood. She begged Caesar not to go to the Senate. Caesar had been warned by multiple people. A soothsayer had told him weeks earlier to beware the Ides of March. A letter was pressed into his hand that morning, naming the conspiracy. He never read it. Whether he didn't believe the danger or didn't care, we cannot know. He went to the Senate. The conspirators had planned carefully. They smuggled daggers under their togas. When Caesar arrived and sat down, they surrounded him. One senator, Tillius Cimber, approached with a petition. As Caesar reached to push the petition aside, Cimber grabbed his toga, pulled it down from his neck. It was the signal. The first blow came from behind, a dagger glancing across Caesar's neck. Caesar grabbed the arm of the man who struck him, shouting. What exactly, the sources do not agree on. And then the others were on him. 23 senators, 23 daggers. They stabbed one another in the chaos. The blows came from every direction. Caesar fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, his old enemy, his dead rival, the man whose face had watched over the Senate chamber. He pulled his toga over his face as he died. Whether for dignity or resignation, we do not know. 23 wounds. The coroner, Rome had one, concluded only one was fatal. The second blow, to the chest. The Senate chamber erupted in panic. The conspirators had made no plan for what came next. They had killed Caesar. They expected Rome to celebrate. Rome did not celebrate. The streets fell silent. Shops closed. The people were not relieved. They were stunned, and then furious. Mark Antony, Caesar's most loyal officer, obtained Caesar's will and his body. He arranged a public funeral, and at that funeral, he read the will aloud. Caesar had left his gardens to the Roman people as a public park. He had left every Roman citizen 300 sesterces, a significant sum. And then Antony held up Caesar's toga, torn, bloodstained,
punctured with 23 holes. Rome erupted. The crowd tore through the city. They burned the conspirators' houses. They hunted them through the streets. Brutus and Cassius fled Rome. They would never return. The republic the conspirators had tried to save died with Caesar.
What followed was 13 more years of civil war, ending only when Caesar's adopted son Octavian, later Augustus, became Rome's first emperor. The Republic was finished. The Empire had begun.
Julius Caesar died on the Ides of March, 44 BC. He was 55 years old. And yet, nearly 2,100 years later, Julius Caesar remains the most famous individual in the history of Western civilization. The calendar. The Julian calendar, introduced by Caesar, governed the entire Western world for 1,600 years. The Gregorian calendar, which we use today, is a minor modification of Caesar's design. Every time you check the date, you are using a system Julius Caesar built. The title. Caesar became a title. The German word for emperor, Kaiser, comes from Caesar. The Russian word, Tsar, comes from Caesar. Arabic, Qaisar. The man's name became the word for supreme ruler across languages and centuries. The month. July, the month Caesar was born, was renamed in his honor. Julius became July. It has been July for 2,000 years. Military innovation. Caesar's tactics, rapid movement, engineering under fire, psychological warfare, flexibility, were studied by Napoleon, who called Caesar the greatest commander in history. They are still studied in military academies today.
Literature. Caesar's own writings, his Gallic War commentaries, are still read in Latin classes across the world. Clear, precise, brilliant. Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is performed every year across the English-speaking world, 400 years after it was written. The end of the Republic and the birth of the Empire. Whether this was good or bad, historians debate endlessly. Caesar found a republic that was failing its people, corrupt, unequal, paralyzed. He broke it open. What replaced it, the Roman Empire, lasted another 500 years in the West and nearly 1,500 years in the East as Byzantium. The man himself. Was Caesar a hero or a villain? A liberator or a tyrant? The Gauls he conquered, 1,000,000 dead, 1,000,000 enslaved, had their own answer. The Roman poor he fed and housed, a different answer. The senators who killed him, their own answer. His soldiers who wept at his funeral, theirs. Perhaps the most honest answer is this. Caesar was a force of nature. Like all forces of nature, he could not be judged by ordinary human standards. He simply was. He changed the world, and the world has never changed back. The die is cast. It was cast in 44 BC, and it is still rolling.
2,000 years ago, a man crossed a small river in northern Italy with his army. He could have stopped, turned back, lived quietly. He didn't. That crossing, the Rubicon, changed Western history forever. The Roman Republic died. The Roman Empire was born. And from that empire, Roman law, Roman architecture, Roman language, Roman Christianity, the entire foundation of Western civilization emerged. Julius Caesar did not intend all of this. No man could. But he set it in motion. He showed the world that one man, with vision, with courage, with ruthlessness, could reshape an entire civilization. And he paid for it with 23 dagger wounds on a marble floor. But his killers are forgotten. Their names survive only because they killed him. Caesar's name, his calendar, his title, his month,
lives in every language on Earth. That is his true conquest. Not Gaul, not Rome. Time itself. Vini, Vidi, Vici.
And friends, after Caesar came the empire, and after Rome came the greatest conqueror the world has ever seen, a man born on the steppes of Central Asia, who couldn't read, who grew up in poverty, who was abandoned by his own tribe as a child, and who went on to conquer more territory than any man in human history. The Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan. From the steppes of Mongolia to the gates of Europe. One man, one vision. The world's most terrifying army. Coming next. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with anyone who loves history.